Today's podcast is brought to you in part by Real Marketing, the only marketing firm recommended exclusively by the Institute. Real Marketing utilizes over 25 years of expertise, and their products are built and customized for you to dominate any neighborhood anywhere. Go to realmarketingforyou.com. That's realmarketing4u.com. Also, look for past A State of Mind episodes with CEO David Collins as our guest. Hi, Jack. Glad to see you.
Good morning, Tami. How are you doing?
I'm great. What are we talking about today?
Well, it's interesting because you and I have talked about a number of different topics, and one of the things I thought would be fun to explore are design trends for 2023. And, I want to make it clear to our listeners, we are not trying to be interior designers or architects and get too far outside our lane here. However, as we discussed previously, a lot of our clients lean on us when they're talking about doing remodels, updating their home, making sure they're doing things that are marketable for resale. And certainly that's where we come in. And also with we have builder clients who are talking about the trends in the market. What are we seeing? What do buyers want? And so it's very important, I think, as a luxury specialist to understand what's happening in the marketplace and to make sure that we know how to bring in the right partners. So again, we're not interior designers here, but we've worked with quite a few of them. And so what we're doing today is we'll look through some of the media, some of the articles that are out there online and magazines and see what the professionals are saying about design trends in 2023 for the luxury home market. Some of the commentary I think, Tami, you and I offer might be about what's happening in our respective markets. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we're observing what's going on across the country.
Absolutely. And right now, at this time of year, everybody is offering their opinions. And I think everybody's looking for a little change. Is that what you're seeing in most of these design forecasts?
Absolutely. It was most evident for us here locally when we had our recent parade of homes in the last quarter of 2022. And so what we started seeing for the first time is what a lot of interior designers are commenting on as well, this move away from stark minimalism. So for the last few years, we've seen so much white on white on white,
and gray on gray on gray.
Gray, yeah. Everything was white exteriors, white kitchens, gray walls. And so everything was, a lot of the same color schemes and quite frankly, somewhat bland and a little bit on the sterile side.
Yeah, and a lot of the articles were referencing in the pandemic, everybody wanted that safe space. And so they were equating some of those bland color schemes with hospitals and airports. I thought that was pretty clever. I think in my marketplace, I think, we're influenced a little bit more by coastal style as opposed to what's going on around the country. But certainly in new construction, you are seeing those palettes that had been that stark, all white, all gray, really starting to adopt in some accent colors and some a little bit of warmth, if you will. Even the whites that I'm seeing right now are a little creamier, and they're attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed it mostly, I think, in kitchens. For the last 3 or 4 years, it seems like every home I've been in, if it's new construction or recently updated, it was white painted cabinets and white countertops. Everything was white. And although it was high impact, and when we first started seeing that trend, it was a lot of fun to see that real fresh kind of feel. But it's not very practical.
It's definitely not. If you enjoy cooking, it is not practical.
No, if you actually cook in that kitchen, if you even just making coffee, every coffee ground, everything shows. So it's not a real practical look. But also, again, some of the articles we saw in Architectural Digest and Home and Gardens and some of the other sources that we saw talked about this move away from that, that all white kitchen. One of the things they talked about, as you mentioned, is getting back to some colors and getting back to something more with character and texture. And we're starting to see that here. So the white's definitely out. We are actually seeing more of the gray also giving way to color, whether it be kitchens or family rooms or throughout the main bodies of the house, where we didn't see much color in the last few years. I personally blame restoration hardware because several years ago, it seemed like, you'd walk in a restoration hardware store, which, is that national kind of iconic home place. And it was always fresh and bright and light. And then suddenly one day I walked in the store and it's like it turned the lights off and everything was gray, dim lighting. And then suddenly it seemed that every home that we went in, at least in our market, had gray hues on the walls, very dim lighting. And it was a mood. But it seems that mood is giving way to some color.
And talking about the color, it's really interesting reading about the impact of accent walls, which is something that we've seen for a long time, but is more practical. I had a closing earlier today, and my buyer was talking about the fact that they've chosen all the accent wall colors, and they have tons of texture on the walls and that sort of thing. So I thought it was ironic that we were going to talk about that, and here was the conversation live and in person. But I really appreciate the idea that texture and some addition of color makes it feel just more cozy, right? And even the shift from farmhouse, right? Like if I see another barn door, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do, but they're even shifting up that style to be a little warmer as opposed to stark, and introducing darker colors. And I thought it was really interesting to see the importance of crafted wood, right? And my first thought was, oh my goodness, are we back in the 70s, right, with cabinetry and that sort of thing? But it's a little more elegant and sophisticated, particularly in the upper tier. But I appreciate those kinds of features.
Yeah, I think and again, I only work in our market here in Middle Tennessee. And as you mentioned, you guys are influenced, there are coastal influences, things you see only in your market that you wouldn't typically see here or other parts of the country. I'll give you a good example. One of my favorite things to see when I go in coastal markets, I love the use of tabby. I think that's what you call it. Is that right? Tabby, where they do it's like they do little fireplaces a lot and foundations where it's like a concrete mixed with shells. Is that the name?
Oh, I've never actually heard that, and I should probably be ashamed of myself for not knowing the nomenclature, but I do know what you're talking about. Yeah.
It's a really cool treatment you really only see, in coastal South Carolina and Florida and place, at least on the East Coast. I'm not sure if the West Coast follows suit, but I love that treatment, but it wouldn't work very well here in Tennessee, obviously.
No. And people want that when they're at their beach place, but I'm not sure if that's something that most people would want to live with every day.
And their primary home, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, it's funny. So in our market, it's really interesting. First of all, I think Chip and Joanna Gaines may be going out of business after the sliding barn doors, the shiplap gets pushed away. I actually asked this question in our sales meeting this morning. The company we work for is large, and so I work out of our corporate office, and we have sales meetings here for our office here in the Brentwood market, which is one of our larger offices. We've got about 150 agents here. But I talked about this podcast in a sales meeting and said, hey, guys, what are you seeing? Because I've been doing the research, across the country on these various media outlets, like Architectural Digest I referenced earlier, the Washingtonian magazine. And it's interesting because, we're seeing shiplap go away. We're seeing that urban farmhouse go away. We kind of overdid it on that, I think. But it's interesting because what won't happen, at least in our market, we actually do have a lot of farms and farmland and green spaces fairly close into downtown Nashville. So you can drive 30 minutes away and be in what we call a gentleman's farm, where it's
literally
15 acres, not 500 or 5,000 acres. But with these smaller farms in the area, I think that farmhouse look, if you will, the urban farmhouse with the shiplap and it is kind of white on white to some degree, that probably isn't trendy in those rural and kind of suburban markets. It fits the area, and it's kind of an organic type of architecture. It just fits. Where I do think we'll see it go away here and across the country is when you're in a typical subdivision neighborhood going from house to house, and you suddenly see this white farmhouse looking product where every room has shiplap and the sliding barn doors you referenced earlier. Very much a trendy kind of thing. I've noticed not only in my online research and seeing what's happening in other markets and talking to some of our colleagues in other markets, particularly larger markets, but I'm seeing it happening here too in Nashville, and that is, as you mentioned, the color, the accent walls. So I know in 2000s, 2004, 5, 6, we were starting to see here a lot of dark ceilings, okay, and completely dark rooms. It was almost a medieval kind of feel. It was too much, too extra. So we would that shift to all white, and now what we're seeing, as you mentioned, is that accent wall. And so we are seeing more like the accent wall in a foyer or an accent wall, even in a dining room. There's certainly a headboard walls in the owner suites. But it's a lot of fun because as we go from builder to builder in different parts of the country that I've visited, we love visiting, looking at model homes sometimes when we're traveling, is people take that accent wall and do all kinds of fun things with it. So depending on the trim carpenter you have, they do all sorts of creative designs on that wall. It's monochromatic, so they pick a color, and the trim of the wall and everything is the same color, but it's about the texture.
Yeah.
And so that's what's very different, I think, than the kind of minimalistic white that was the trend for so long.
Let's talk a little bit more about texture because we're seeing a lot of attention on wallpaper, right?
Oh, yeah.
And the word just makes me cringe. You think about how many people have paid how much money to remove wallpaper,
Right.
but there's some paintable wallpaper. There's some nice texture that isn't overdone or flowery. We're seeing a lot of organic, nature-inspired wallpaper, but also some that are just texture. And I see that a lot in our high-end properties. And I always watch to see what the buyer thinks, right? Because that can be daunting if somebody chooses something that has that level of texture and of permanency, if you will. That's risky in terms of resale or overall market appeal. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one, you're making a commitment. It's a whole lot easier to paint and repaint than it is to remove wallpaper and do wallpaper. So you're certainly making a commitment, just like you would if you add tile or a countertop, that sort of thing. With the wallpapers, again, at least in our market, it seems we're seeing it's more accent walls than entire rooms. You might see a powder room done entirely in wallpaper, but throughout the house, we're seeing more an accent wall with wallpaper, and we are seeing more of those geometrical patterns like the Art Deco sort of thing, like the scalloped and the different designs, as opposed to just floral. We have the floral too; they're beautiful, but yeah, we're seeing a lot of wallpaper, and we're seeing a lot of exotic wallpapers too, things I've never seen, which is beautiful. The interior designers are bringing some really, really unique product into our marketplace, particularly because we're not a New York or LA, we're middle America. And so it's nice to see our interior designers, which are just fabulous here in our area, bringing some of this product that we haven't seen here before.
So speaking of product, one of the things that we wanted to talk about was luxury vinyl flooring. And you had an interesting thing to say about that. And for me, my first question was, really, in the luxury space,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What did
It's
you
so funny.
say about the juxtaposition of the words even?
Exactly. I think when you see the word luxury and vinyl, the same phrase or sentence is somewhat cringeworthy, but actually it's amazing what they've done with the vinyl product. We're seeing luxury vinyl being used in like rec rooms, basement rooms, pool houses, a lot of high traffic and wet areas, for example. So for a walkout level basement, which is very common in our market because of the rolling topography that we have to offer, a lot of folks will have a big area downstairs at basement level, where you might have a secondary kitchen and a rec room and perhaps a home theater or pool tables, that sort of thing, opening up to a nice outdoor living area with a pool, a spa, all of that. Well, there's a lot of water that comes in with that traffic because you're coming in from the pool area, and you want something that's not necessarily this durable, that works well on adhering to the concrete, the slab, and the luxury vinyl one looks remarkably like hardwood. I mean, you have to get down and tap on it with your hand to know that it's actually vinyl. So it does have a different feel if you actually get down to the floor and tap on it. But until you do so, some of the better product lines, you can't tell without actually getting down and looking at it that it's actually a vinyl. But the other nice thing is because it's impervious to the moisture, the water, it's terrific for pets. So in terms of being scratch resistant, and of course, it's a much more affordable option than some of the alternatives that we've been using through the years, like tile, et cetera.
And easier to replace.
Easier to
I'll
install.
have to take your word on the basement concept because, of course, in my market area, we're at or below sea level, right? So,
Got it. Yeah.
so we don't have those things called basements unless they're in special circumstances. But it makes perfect sense for those kinds of areas. So, in that application, are you seeing that the luxury vinyl is being used in those areas with a different surface that's maybe a higher quality level in the main areas of the house, or are you seeing the adoption of it all the way through?
No. If you look at any of your primary areas of the home, for our market, most commonly used product will be sand and stain hardwood. We're a traditional Southern market. We are seeing a lot of transitional and contemporary architectural styles evolving here pretty dramatically and quickly throughout our market, new construction, but they're still using predominantly sand and stain hardwood. And some of our listeners, depending on the market you're in, you may not be familiar with that concept because I know with you being coastal, there's a lot more use of tile on flooring than you might perhaps use hardwood. But for our market, that means installing hardwood floors in a rough stage, actual solid hardwood that's sanded, stained, and then sealed. That's the predominant floor you'll see throughout our market. And then, of course, when you get into wet areas like your bathrooms, you'll see a variety of tiles being used like anywhere else in the country. Now, what is different, at least for us, is that we typically see the real sand and stain hardwood go throughout the house, including the kitchen. So we don't usually change over to tile for kitchen areas. I think most designers see, when you're standing in the kitchen, you're looking throughout the great room or the family room or whatever connects to that space. You don't want a lot of flooring changes. It breaks up the view. So it just helps kind of bring a more cohesive look to all those spaces we're in if it's one type of flooring that's used throughout. And that for us, that's sand and stain hardwood. Now, there are some pre-finished, really nice pre-finished options we're seeing terrific that are pretty typical as well. That continues to be a mainstay product for our market.
Sure. And in ours as well. And you're right that we have an awful lot more tile and tile with a little bit of a surface. So maybe that is going to be perfect for the design trends with a little texture because we do have a lot of wet areas. And so you want that non-slip as opposed to that super shiny 80s, 90s tile. So yeah, it is interesting to think about what is prevalent in different markets. And you mentioned the introduction of a lot of different styles of architecture, and you mentioned the deco as it related to the curves. So some of the research that that you did in the articles that you shared with me were referencing, gosh, what did they call it? Biophilic design, right? And that is using natural resources to create a sense of harmony between modern architecture and the modern world with natural light emphasized. And that made me think of two different styles that are the dichotomy of one another, but that both accomplish this. And that was mid-century modern, right? Which we have a lot of, and I'm such a fan. It's all about the light and the nature and interesting architecture, but it's angular. And Art Deco, which has the same sort of organic feel, but it's all about the curve. So I thought that was interesting that the same end result could manifest itself in two such very different architectural styles. So what are you seeing?
Well, the other thing too that with using this, and I'll be honest with you, biophilic design, I wasn't real familiar with the concept until I started doing research for our podcast today. But basically, what he would say would just simply be bringing the outdoors in.
Yeah,
same basic concept, and that is whether it means the finishes you use on your interior spaces, using a lot of wood. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Bringing natural products you see outside in. But the other part of it is kind of this seamless connection between the inside of the home and the exterior, between the outside. I know for us, it's interesting because when you look at homes built prior to 2000 in our market, almost every home had a patio or a deck. You rarely ever saw a covered porch or a screen porch. And around the early 2000s, I think around 2004, 2005, well before the market crashed, builders started recognizing for our market, again, this is market driven because of the climate that you're in. We have 4 distinct seasons, but they're fairly mild seasons. They're not super extreme. So we have a tremendous opportunity with outdoor living. And so the trend shifted to homes having wonderful outdoor spaces, covered outdoor spaces, and large covered outdoor spaces. So they're designed for alfresco dining and large covered outdoor spaces that would include fireplaces and fire pits and now fire tables, which have become quite popular. And so again, tying the inside to the outside, that trend's been going on for several years now.
And that's natural. That's natural to my market, right? We've been fortunate in Florida. Of course, you've had the ubiquitous Florida room that was either walls of glass or something that was halfway. And those spaces are typically transformed with fully pocketing sliding doors that offer great covered lanais that are the connection between the house and the pool, with tremendous outdoor entertainment spaces. And honestly, in a lot of cases, for our ordinary homes, a nice waterfront home that typically was about 1,800 to 2,000 square feet at $1,750,000. And all of a sudden, if it's done right, the expansiveness, you can almost double your living space, your functional living space, just by embracing that flow to the inside and the outside. So we see that really quite often here, and it's remarkable what we're seeing in terms of outdoor kitchens and entertainment space, as you said.
One of the things I was very happy to see kind of go away from our market several years ago, when they first started really focusing on outdoor living here, taking more advantage of that, the introduction of the nano door, which is, I think it's a brand name, but it was a folding door that opened up, to create that seamless interior-exterior exchange. I call them the finger pinchers. They're beautiful. They let the light in, but when you get that thing, opening or closing with some momentum, they're kind of dangerous, particularly with little kids. So now, again, it's the trend is toward large sliding doors that can basically take a wall and open it completely up, and so your family room suddenly becomes twice the size because you're opening up to a porch. I thought it was one of the articles that we looked at. I was just looking for the reference. I can't find it at the moment, but it was funny because they talked about things that are going out. And one thing that's going out, which ties into this, is all the, numerous candle lighting. And so one of the things that have been a trend here for so many years, which I'm glad to see the shift, was for so many years, the trend in architecture here was, first of all, it was more traditional architecture. And so you would see a kitchen, and outside the kitchen, beyond the kitchen, would be what we would call a family room, or perhaps even a hearth room, because it would have a fireplace in it. And it'd be a door on either or both sides of the fireplace, or perhaps one of those nano doors or some large opening, and it would open to a covered porch. And the idea being, you could make, during the right season, you could have full use of all those spaces when you're entertaining. Well, what happens is, when you design that way, is your kitchen becomes the center of the house, which means your kitchen is very dark. And so to offset that, you've got to have tons and tons of can lighting. And one of our sources referred to it as like a landing field. Looks like a landing strip at an airport, which is true. I had a client several years ago. It was so funny because during that time period where they first started creating these big hearth rooms with the covered porches, which created all this dark space, she would go in a house, and of course, all the listing brokers would have the house all lit up and beautiful like a show home. The first thing she would do would go through, flip all the switches off immediately.
Yeah.
She says, I want to see what the kitchen looks like with all the lights off. And she'd go right to the kitchen, turn all the lights off, and within 5 seconds, she'd be nope or yep. And determine whether the showing would go on or not.
I had a buyer do just that recently. And the listing agent, who's there with this beautifully lit and prepared home to show, I thought that she was going to cry a little bit when the woman came through and just started turning the lights out, right? So you're absolutely right on that. People want to know that there's enough light, natural light in a space without being so reliant on artificial.
Yeah, and I think so architecturally for us, again, we have, as you mentioned on the beginning of the show, one of my specialties is relocation services and, of course, luxury product. And so a large influx of our relocation are folks from California. We talked about in the prior podcast, I believe. Folks from California, coastal California, moving into the Nashville market, Middle Tennessee, and they're coming from a lot of contemporary construction and transitional construction, transitional architecture, and that is what builders are doing here more. I think as a result, they're trying to appeal to that particular buyer. And so that type of architecture has large windows without grids, big seamless panes, almost picture windows, if you will, that lets all that light come in. which is wonderful. I think most of us appreciate that, with the exception of you got to be careful with UVA rays and expensive
Sure.
furnishing, paintings, that sort of thing. And there's things we can do to protect, of course. So we're seeing that change. Looking back over the kitchen, the hearth room scenario I described earlier, how that evolved for us was, I told you we had decks and patios for so many years. I don't think anybody had the forethought to say, oh, we put this beautiful covered porch. What it does to our everyday living inside the home, it creates that cave-like atmosphere. Nobody wants that. And so now pretty much all new construction, all remodels for us are focusing on how to get more light in and create that biophilic environment, that harmonious environment between the outside and inside, and use of more organic materials. Tell us about cabinetry. Did we talk about that yet?
Well, we just mentioned it a little bit. I saw some amazing photos of some incredibly crafted, textured, like horizontal textured wood lower cabinets. And I think the one that really struck me was in a upscale bathroom. And, if you think back, there was a lot of that going on in the 70s, but with a completely different thing. It was like a veneer then. And so certainly there's some veneer products, but they were talking about the investment in quality wood with that kind of texture and character is outweighing, if you will, the additional expense. But that's interesting, because that typically brings a darker anchor, if you will, to lower cabinets or islands or vanities or that sort of thing.
But we're not talking Brady Bunch here. When you hear the term wood paneling, my first mental image as a almost 60-year-old is that staircase in the Brady Bunch house and all that wood paneling, which is so popular in the 70s. Of course, Mr. Brady was an architect, so that was a product to use then.
But they were all the rage then, right?
Oh, absolutely.
That was hip.
Yeah, everybody had paneling, particularly for us, again, basement rec rooms all had paneling. I had paneling around your fireplace. The wood that we're seeing being used now, the trend that we're seeing, again, we're talking about the trends and what's moving forward, is a trend, again, away from the monochromatic white and getting more into texture. And so one of the textures we're seeing a lot is in our upper tier, the luxury market, is using that wood, that real wood. We're seeing it everywhere, used on cabinetry, not painted, but stained. We're seeing it used on the ceilings. A lot of our homes you'll see perhaps it might be a cream colored wall with wood used on the ceiling, wide plank wood on the ceiling, and wide plank hardwood on the floor as well. It's a really cool look. Or maybe going into an alcove before you go into the owner's suite, a wood alcove. It kind of breaks up, here's the public spaces and here's our private space. You have a transition walking in that space. So it's really kind of interesting to see how they're using all parts of the home, hoods, over hoods for ovens. It's just all these interesting ways they can use it. And so it's, again, a lot of textures, a lot of accent walls, and it makes the whole space feel, I think, much more organic and less, to use the word one of our folks in the article used, clinical, less clinical.
Yeah, less clinical, absolutely. And what's interesting is where they referenced the move away from minimalism. And they said that the direction we're going is maximalism, right? So that was kind of interesting, right? Like go all in with things that just make you feel cozy and comfortable. And somebody referred to the term nesting. And I remember, probably 15 years ago, Faith Popcorn actually brought that to the forefront and said, we've gone from cocooning to nesting, right? And that was, again, this kind of design trend. So it goes to show that everything is cyclical. Absolutely.
You were talking about mid-century modern earlier, and if you visit Palm Springs, that's one of those markets that's known for its mid-century modern, or the fact that they cherish their mid-century modern architecture, and there's so much of it, is, they've never been afraid to play with color. And as a matter of fact, they celebrate color. So you might see a monochromatic wall color scheme, and it may be all white, but boy, once you leave the walls, everything you see, whether it be accent walls, furnishing pieces, every other thing in the house could be any color on the spectrum.
Absolutely. And all colors, all at the same time.
All at the same time, which is really interesting. You can't do that in all architecture, but it certainly works well for mid-century modern. One of the things, again, with color that we haven't talked about yet, again, has to do with architecture on your luxury homes is the exterior.
Yes.
One of the things I brought up again in our sales meeting today is my almost disdain for a white painted brick, because we're in a market we're very fortunate because there are lots of brick homes and people love having brick homes. But as brick homes age, sometimes they're settling and you have cracks and whatnot. And the easy fix is to paint, because you can't match mortar, you can't match old brick and that sort of thing. And then over the last few years, again, I blame this on Chip and Joanna Gaines. If they have Netflix, they won't be a fan of mine. Although I love some of the cool things they did, that they have done and continue to do. But one of the things they did a lot of, again, with that kind of, monochromatic, white on white, that farmhouse thing, and boy, for years in our market, it's still happening, unfortunately, to some degree, is all the white painted brick and new construction where they build with the least expensive brick available and they come back and paint it white. And so you end up having all the homes have the same look. It looks like one designer came to the marketplace and went whoosh and did everybody's exterior. So the bounce back is that a lot of builders, at the influence of some of our better interior designers and architects, are starting to use color on the outside. So we're seeing a lot of bold colors used on the exterior of homes, and mixing colors in the exterior, mixing textures. So you'll see some of the same type of wood product used as accent walls on the exterior of a transitional style architecture, used with grays and charcoal and blues and some really unique color palettes that bring a lot of life to the home. So it's not one more white house down the block.
I'm very fortunate to be in a market where not only do we have the traditional Florida ranch style that really was one builder coming through the entire neighborhood and building, but we also have some historic neighborhoods with homes, wood frame homes that were built in everywhere from the late 1800s up until the 1930s. And there's been such care given to the historic preservation of those and the resurgence of those neighborhoods that they're it's kind of like Key West, right? Everything is a different color. There's no homogeneous nature. And I'll tell you what, I'm considering painting the exterior of my house. And so I just go drive through those neighborhoods and see what things are looking good together. And I think they're right on target with where the trends are going in terms of exterior color and character.
Well, and you're right. That's something very common in your market, not common in ours, but we're starting to see the influx. And it's fun also to see like the front door being accent color. So you might see an orange front door on a charcoal home, and a home with it. When I say charcoal, meaning it could be brick and wood and maybe some accent stucco, whether it be synthetic hardcoat stucco, whatever the product is, or Arca stone, where they just have a splash of color with the front door. And that's fun too. And these are things that you wouldn't have seen, at least not in our market, you would not have seen 5 years ago. And now being a little bit more adventurous, it seems like, and a new product being built today. And also renovations, we're seeing that. So as our time is coming to a close, there's one thing in our research that I think we have to talk about. And as we've talked about the connection between the indoor and the outdoor and the importance of outdoor space, it's the pickleball court. Yeah, oh my gosh, it's so funny because I was showing properties yesterday, and one of the couple who are my clients brought their daughter, and she's a professional here in our area as well. And the first thing she's looking for is where can we put the pickleball court? And I have heard that come up several times over the last year. I guarantee you, I've never heard the word pickleball used in our market until the last 12 months. I've heard it multiple times over the last couple of months where people are talking about incorporating pickleball courts. And apparently, I guess the evolution of that, and I've read this actually, there's a website called brick.com. Funny enough, it's brick industry. But boy, whoever their writers are for their design trends on architectural design, interior design, are wonderful, because they had a terrific article and they talked a lot about this. And apparently the evolution of it is that communities over the last 10, 15 years have really put an emphasis, planned communities, on these luxury style amenity packages. So it's not just a pool for a neighborhood pool. It's a resort style pool with the sliding boards and all the fun stuff for families and kids and whatever. And along with that comes all the other fun things that you might see in a resort. And one thing that started to happen was pickleball courts. And so folks realized how much fun, not just to say pickleball, but to actually play pickleball. And to anybody, you don't have to have a super great skill set to play, to have a lot of fun. And so as it became more popular, people started saying, well, gosh, I wouldn't mind having a pickleball court in my yard, just the way you might have a tennis court or a pool or whatever in your yard. So yeah, so pickleball apparently is catching on. Have you played pickleball?
I have not, but I will tell you that I had out of town buyers. Well, we can't play pickleball, Jack, because we work too much. But the buyers that I had coming in from out of town recently, looking in the multi-million-dollar range for a secondary property, and one of the first questions that they asked was where the pickleball courts were. And during their stay here, I had to work my schedule around the fact that she was going to go play pickleball. And it's perfectly fine for people to go without a partner and just go and play. Now, she found that the folks in this market here are very competitive, but it was such an interesting thing. And in the article that you're referencing, it was talking about not only the space to put a pickleball court, but the influence on exterior materials, right? So some of the synthetic turf and that sort of thing that can absorb the activity. So that's a whole nother path of outdoor enjoyment that really is going to be most visible in the upper tier because of the expense of that.
Newly evolving. Yeah, according to that same website, brick.com, they were stating they looked at building costs across the country. Apparently, to build a good pickleball court, the official size, which apparently 64 feet by 34 feet, because I know everybody's dying to know. $50,000 to build. So it's it's an somewhat expensive endeavor to add a pickleball court to your yard, but apparently becoming very popular in the luxury market. So it's not caught on here yet. The fact the only ones I've had asking about it are buyers from other markets, usually larger markets, moving here, but it looks like it's catching on. So I thought it was kind of cool.
Absolutely.
Do you have time to ask about? I want to ask you about one other item.
Okay, we've got one more.
One more item. One thing we've seen a lot of in our market, and it's just happened very quickly over the last couple of years, and is certainly the trend for 2023, is curbless showers and continuous flooring.
Yes.
And I love it. It's almost like a gym shower. So traditionally, you have your floor of your bathroom, then you have a curb or a lip around your shower, and you would tile your floor of your bathroom, and then typically you might have a different tile for your shower. It could be an all tile shower or glass or whatever. Well, the trend now that we've seen for the last year or two here, and certainly moving forward, is that your floor goes directly into your shower with no curb, which gives designers and builders the opportunity to carry the same design of the floor of the bathroom directly into the shower seamlessly, not breaking up that space, and then using those really cool glass walls, for your shower, which is kind of neat look. I like it.
Now, I tell you, it looks a lot more attractive than the gym shower.
Yeah, well, no doubt.
In that application.
Definitely more attractive, but there's also a functional piece to that too, as I've thought about it, because with baby boomers being the largest
That's right.
Our population, that curb or that lip is sometimes problematic. So now you've got access to walk in without stepping over anything.
Yep, I was thinking the same thing about aging in place, or when people have had to introduce an older generation into their home. And a lot of influence still coming out of the pandemic that is influencing decisions for the future about what if that spot ever happens again? What if we have to make a change and we have the ability to stay right here and make our space work for us? So definitely all sorts of trends. And Jack, I know we could talk about this all day. We've had fun preparing for this podcast, and I have a feeling that this is going to give us some opportunity for some other conversations too. And one thing that I have realized, for those of you that have seen the video clips or have participated in any of my webinars, you know that the office that I'm sitting in right now, my Zoom room, is all black and white. And Jack is in a space with beautiful, bright color behind him. And I'm thinking to myself, this is it. I'm going to have to up my game and add some color to my environment. So That gave me a good smile. So, Jack, I look forward to the next episode that we'll do. And in the meantime, I want to thank everyone out there listening so much for joining us on this episode of A State of Mind, the Art of Selling Luxury Real Estate. If you're interested in learning more about the Institute, you can find that at luxuryhomemarketing.com. And if you like what you just heard, please share it with a friend and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Thanks for listening.